here now, ready to discuss about this topic that we've seen maybe in the media. We hear people saying the metaverse, what is that thing, and how companies are using it. We're mostly going to be discussing here a little bit about, from this point of view of business and companies and kind of like the future of work. So after all of this, speaking with art, now we're going to focus a little bit in business, but there is going to be a little bit for everybody. So the metaverse. What is the metaverse? So we're going to be discussing this with Kevin and Sheila to pick their brains on what are their thoughts and their experience and how has been their interaction about this topic with their own clients. Perfect. Maybe you can go ahead.
Do we want to start with that and then do intros? Or?
Yeah, no, let's do the intros first.
Okay, sounds good. There you go. There I am. So I'm Kevin Paquin. I'm the Senior Director of Technology Consulting Services in our digital transformation practice in online business systems. A lot of words, not super important what that all means, but basically I manage all of our tech people. So our developers, our architects, folks like that. I'm in charge of, I'm going to read my own slide, data and AI, agile coaching, as well as Metaverse and XR. So basically whatever we're doing that has a technical topic, I typically have a spot at the table.
Awesome. Next we can go with Sheila, and I go. Yeah.
Hi, I'm sorry, that was loud. I'm Sheila Harris. I'm a senior digital transformation consultant with Capstone Ridge Group, and that's also a lot of words. But essentially, what I do is I help businesses adapt to. Can you still hear me? Sorry.
Yeah.
You turned me down. Thank you. Adapt to implementing new solutions, which typically means technology. But I also have a really large focus on the people side of things and helping people adapt to new technologies. So that's why for me the metaverse is a really interesting topic, because there's a huge adoption and an adaptation piece that's associated with transitioning from physical interactions to digital interactions. So I do a bunch of other stuff too. I do some executive coaching, some mentoring. I'm with Manitoba Women in Tech, and I'm also a blockchain educator, which I'm super passionate about that topic as well.
And here I am. I am Diana, and I'm an engineer by profession. I am originally from Colombia, as you can see by my accent. Yeah, it's always very, very noticeable. I've been working in this space for a couple of years now, like moving a little bit from engineering and kind of mixing also stuff from engineering. I am the founder of Method, which is an exact design studio. And I'm also the host of the XR Magazine podcast, and I've been able to interview big founders from the Oculus store, like Gravity Sketch, Trip, Immerse, Amazing Journey, like learning from all of these founders. So yeah, that's what I've been doing, and very excited to be talking here about the metaverse. So now I'm gonna repeat the question again. What is the metaverse?
All right, and it wasn't a dodge, but it is a tricky question. And I'll say, the metaverse is still under development. There is no metaverse that you can go out and use today. So the definition, I would say, differs based on who you talk to. I would encourage, not to say we aren't experts, but I would go and check out Matthew Ball online. He's a futurist and has some really good definitions around there. And they're all very lengthy, so we are not going to quote through all the things that he has to say. But what I'll say is, it's a collection of many different environments, all 3D rendered. They are persistent. So if you're in the metaverse and you own a house and you leave the dishes in the sink, well, guess what? When you come back tomorrow, they will still be there. There's a lot of important things around data and how data would transfer between those different worlds, right? So if you have, some people look at Fortnite and suggest that it is a bit of a metaverse world, I guess. I think I would agree with that, as a lot of those features. But anyway, the point is, if you buy something in Fortnite, you own that, right? So the data is transferable. So your identity will move from world to world, from experience to experience, as well as the things that you own, and all of those assets. So that's super high level and super nebulous, and you know, it's kind of there on purpose because again, we're learning, we're building as we go. But there are examples of what the metaverse could be in the future, right? So if any of you have read Ready Player One, I always encourage people to take a look at that. That is a really good description of what the metaverse could be. One thing that it doesn't have that many people suggest that the metaverse being important is the decentralization. So it's kind of owned by this company. I don't know, but you know, essentially there's some ownership there. It's not kind of public, and there is an idea that, you know, we don't want a specific company driving and saying what the metaverse is. A company could have an environment within the metaverse, and that's totally on base, right? But nobody gets to define it. We get to define it, which is exciting, right? Like we're the pioneers. We're building this thing up. So that's super cool. Yeah, that's probably good. Sheila, you want to add some human element to that?
Yeah, so I agree with a lot of what Kevin said. I think one of the interesting things about the term metaverse is that the origins of it are from a science fiction author named Neil Stephenson, one of my very favorite authors back in the 90s. And it's just been in the past couple of years that this term has caught the attention of the human race, and now it's a thing, right? So I think it's interesting that science fiction writers a lot of times are driving forward these, you know, our future, and they're doing it in ways behind the scenes that a lot of people don't even realize, which I think is really cool. Like there's sci-fi writers on like committees designed to, what do we do when aliens come to talk to us? So I digressed on that though. I think one key element of the metaverse that should be stressed is that it's interactive with other people. So the idea being is that there's, you know, you're not just in a screen in a world by yourself. It's also interaction and a community, right? Kevin made some really good points about today's metaverses, the ones that are being developed by companies formerly named Facebook or Apple or Google. These are silos, right? So for me, a true metaverse includes bridges between silos, or more of an open space where, you know, you can actually interact in multiple, you know, different areas or dimensions of a metaverse and still maintain, to Kevin's point, your identity and your avatars and your collection of things, right? So like I mentioned earlier, one of the reasons I'm interested in the metaverse is because of my blockchain experiences and where we're seeing in blockchain, building those bridges between blockchains where assets, you know, verifiable digital assets are transferable across blockchains. And for me, I think one of the interesting elements of the metaverse is that I see it as being a bottom-up approach to building metaverse in the blockchain world, whereas what we're seeing in the corporate world is a top-down approach where corporations want to build a siloed metaverse and they want it to be the metaverse. And we're seeing this big, you know, competition and race towards who's building the metaverse. And I don't see that as being a recipe for success in terms of building out our future.
I'll add maybe one more thing. And there's often a confusion between XR and the metaverse. So we've been talking about XR quite a bit today. XR could be a way to experience the metaverse. And for many people, it will be, right? Obviously, that is the most immersive thing that we have right now. So you can go in, you can be part of that world, you can experience it. But it also doesn't have to. So you can still experience these worlds in 2D. Likely, you're going to be experiencing it from your phone. In a lot of places in the world. I mean, let's face it, right? We live in a pretty privileged place where we can go out and buy a $500 Oculus headset and probably still be able to live for the rest of the month. But that's not the case across the planet. So, you know, as the metaverse gets developed, it's going to have to be, you know, everybody's going to have to be able to play, and they'll play in different ways. So some people will connect on a PC, and somebody will connect on a phone, and somebody will have, you know, VR, and somebody will have some crazy haptic rig out of Ready Player One, right? So, but we all want to be on an equal footing that we can still interact, we can still work and play together through all those things.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think that XR, it's a little bit of like the media, how we can access, one of the media that we can access, and it's one of the ones that lastly have been like the pretty cool thing with virtual reality, augmented reality. And as the technology moves and gets better and better, of course, we probably are going to be using these devices more and more, as it happened with the cell phone. I believe right now we I don't know how many hours, if you have checking your phones, how many hours you spend in your phone. With XR, with the devices, it might tend to be a little bit like that in the future. So we'll see what happens, but that's why these conversations are very important to understand what are the implications of this, how this is going to impact our day-to-day lives, work, and also big companies with this. So yeah, thank you so much. Another question that we have is, what type of use cases you've seen that you love or would you like to showcase today and why?
Well, for me, the focus on use cases has been not so much in the business world, although there are some compelling use cases, which I know Kevin wants to talk about. So I'm going to focus more on the people aspect of things. One of the things I think is interesting about a concept of a metaverse or having an avatar or interacting in a non-physical space is this idea of wellness and sharing and emotional support. So we found in the pandemic a lot of, sort of mental health issues have come to light and people are a little more open about talking about it, but there's still barriers to being able to talk about your personal experiences and share things. And I think that some of those barriers are removed if you're interacting in a metaverse. So Alt VR is a VR platform and it could be considered a metaverse. And in there's all kinds of support groups and prayer groups and other groups where people can get together and share their experiences and share their pain and have that support network, but without revealing the details of who they actually are in the real world. And that gives them a safety net and that provides some leeway for them to be open and share. And I think that's a really interesting application of like using technology for good. Of course, with any technology, there's dangers inherent in that, right? But I do think that's an interesting use case. Another use case, which, may seem a little silly, but it actually speaks to me because I'm a busy girl. I like clothes. I like to shop. I'm into fashion. I'm a girly girl. I've seen use cases where retailers are experimenting with being able to input your measurements, create an avatar, and actually try on clothes in a virtual world, walk around, sit down, cross your legs, see yourself from the back. And that may seem simplistic, but it's something that I enjoy and I'm interested in. So I think that's a kind of an interesting application. Another use case that I came across was IKEA was experimenting with furniture, where you can go into a virtual showroom and you can also enter in the dimensions of, say, your living space. You can select pieces of furniture, move it around, and sort of reorganize your space and figure out what you're going to buy beforehand, how it's all going to look together, if you're going to have enough room to actually walk around the room and navigate between your couch and your coffee tables. So I think there's some really interesting use cases out there. There's some interesting applications. I think it's all very nascent. We're just at the beginning of this path, and I think we're going to see more and more interesting applications in our, non-work world related to the metaverse and things that you can do in a virtual space.
I think that's important. Like, again, when we talk about that definition of the metaverse, it doesn't have to meet all those criteria to say that it's one of those experiences, right? So, like, a lot of those things are absolutely using all the Web3 technology that, like, the metaverse, if such a thing exists at some point, is going to use, right? So I think it's being inclusive of the different ways that businesses want to take that next step into Web3 is what a lot of it is. And they're going to be working in different ways. So like that wellness example is amazing, right? And those people are going to come together and they're going to meet and they're going to be in that physical space. You can envision that, right? You can see that happening. But how do you take that to like an insurance company, right? You don't want to meet with your insurance company in person and have a good handshake. There's no business value to that. So how do they use some of those technologies? Well, maybe it's LiDAR and the cell phones. Maybe it's augmented reality to bring, to be at the same place as the adjuster while you're looking through your vehicle rather than sitting at MPI for many months. We won't talk about that. But, it takes a long time to do some of those things, right? So there's even just some straight up efficiencies that you can get with, maybe not a whole lot of new technologies, right? Things that are already there right now, but it's understanding how you can apply those. So at Online Business Systems, we're a digital transformation cybersecurity consultancy. We've been around for 35 years. I say that not to plug, but to kind of give some context, right? So 35 years ago, the internet didn't exist. So what we did was kind of lead clients through the transformation of Web 1 as the internet came to be. We've done the same thing for Web 2. as we create mobile applications and portals and all those things. And a lot of our clients are still there. Like, I have a lot of developers on my team. I can tell you they're all building portals and mobile applications for clients right now. But we're trying to make sure we're looking ahead. We're saying, what are the new things that you can be implementing within your company? How can you be taking things to the next level? And a lot of that is just ideation right now. Some of it is bringing people in and sticking a headset on a CEO's head and doing the right things so they don't throw up in VR. I'm sure a few of you probably got that a little bit today. That's okay. That's part of the game. But yeah, just trying to understand what's there and be able to visualize how you could do and what could come next. So there's easy applications like just meeting in a VR room with your team. So we do that once a week with our Metaverse team. We all throw in headsets and we meet once a week and we chat. And that experience, as simple as that sounds, is so much better than when you're on a Teams call or heaven forbid on a phone, right? Just having that body language that you can read and actually be there, like seeing it on Teams is kind of a thing, but if you haven't done that, do it. You'll see the difference. So they don't have to be crazy use cases. Sometimes it can be just taking small steps to being able to, understand and discover more.
Amazing. I think that I love when you speak about the remote feature. I think that that's where the magic starts to happen, because we can also see many examples of creators, etc., where maybe don't have necessarily the utility for that, for being able to communicate remotely. For a person like me, for example, I have my family in Colombia, and during the pandemic, this is one of the reasons why I also became so excited that one day I said to my mom, like, let's get a headset and let's get a coffee, in one of these virtual environments, so we could kind of like have the feeling that, okay, we're kind of close together. Like, it's difficult by phone where I cannot see her, I cannot experience her gestures, but using the technology for these type of things, when there are remote things that we can do together, that's great. Another example that I really like, and this comes from my background in engineering, is that I worked for several years in the government as the design and project engineer. And one of the main challenges that I always had was dealing with 2D drawings and figuring out on site where the elevations go. All these contractors would say, oh yes, this is 2 meters deep, this is, and for me, somehow I don't have very good spatial skills, I guess. It was so hard for me to figure out what they were saying. I had to go to the surveyor and say, could you please tell me what he's trying to say? But imagine now not having to deal with this uncertainty, trying to read hard to the drawings, but now display as a layer with maybe augmented reality glasses on the field this same, the proposed against the design, and being able to actually know exactly what things should be built under, like what are the restrictions, what should we remove, what should we do, and not only that, but if we are able to then work with teams that are in other countries, for example, that would be amazing, because then we can brainstorm and remove many of the guesses, remove many of the problems that happen. These problems that I'm telling you, I can say that sometimes this costs maybe, hundreds of thousands of dollars if mistakes happen. And because we're humans, I'm not just saying something here that is maybe a secret. Sometimes mistake happens, like in all industries. So I think that there is a lot of potential for this to use it in very, very practical cases. And another one that I really love is being able to, I really like this idea of social impact. I think that is something super important for me. And there are organizations that are using this to be able to raise funds, for example. So it's very difficult. This is all about emotional, understanding of needs. So if I am here in Canada and I want to help people in Colombia or in another third world country, let's say, I don't know, Africa, and I want to try to understand what is the person that I'm helping with, like what are the conditions that they are living around. if I can use the technology and see and go and understand, let's say sort of like a tree, and go and understand what are the conditions, then I'm gonna understand better what are the real, like needs or impact that I can make. So for raising funds, this is something that has been using, and I really love that example. Yeah. And yeah, the other one is like being able to restore buildings that are, maybe we might not experience them anymore because the construction is not going to be possible, etc. So bringing back the history again through seeing these amazing features that they were built under or things like that. That's another great case. Yeah. Anything else?
Yeah, I'll just add to that. So if we're still talking about this notion of use cases in, the metaverse or augmented reality, the two compelling ones that I've seen that are used most commonly are for pilots and for surgeons. So one of the great applications of a virtual reality is doing things that are complicated and dangerous, in practice runs and gaining proficiency without actually taking the risks that are inherent with doing those activities. So apparently this notion of doing surgeries, practicing in like a virtual space is becoming a lot more common. There's a lot more hospitals, particularly in the US, that are adopting this technology, which I think is really, really interesting. I do want to raise a concern that I have in that in some cases I feel like there's this agenda for, virtual experiences or metaverse to replace real life experiences, and I don't see that as being an actual thing. The way that I see things is there's, things you can do virtually that just will never replace what you can do physically. So when I listen to live music, I have a different reaction than when I listen to recorded music. When I listen to live music, I will get goosebumps. Sometimes I actually get emotional. I might get a little weepy. I don't generally have those reactions when I listen to the radio. But I think that going to a concert in the metaverse world would be a completely different experience altogether. So I don't think these things are necessarily interchangeable. I think it's really important that we recognize that they are different. And I think they can supplement each other and augment experiences, but I don't think we can say, this metaverse thing will completely replace whatever, that will go away. I don't think that's actually a thing. So I just want to caution about that because I feel like that's kind of a narrative that, some people that are trying to build the metaverse are kind of pushing.
And speaking about that, I wonder, what are your thoughts on, are there any kind of like risks, dangers, or something like that you see, maybe now or in the future? What are your thoughts about that?
At time, but I'll let Kevin speak first.
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And there's, what you just said about kind of whether experiences are going to replace other experiences, there's certainly people that are going to potentially take it that way, right? So maybe they're going to live in that virtual environment their entire life and not get out, not socially interact anymore. It's hard to say. We don't know how well some of these things will translate, right? So maybe if you're making connections with humans within the metaverse and the experience is so good that it's the same as meeting people in person, maybe you walk outside the next day and you can still have those sorts of social interactions, but maybe not. I can tell you that my kids playing Fortnite, even though they're talking to other people while they're playing in the basement, are not really making social interactions in the way that I would like them to, talking to kids at school, right? So I think there's a lot of that just in terms of, social interaction and development, maybe. Maybe I'll take that one, I'll give you it.
Yeah, that's definitely a thing. One of the things I have concerns about is the fact that new tech tends to draw younger people, and younger people may not have built up their radar for predators and for people that aim to harm them. And if you're in a warm and fuzzy metaverse and you're talking to a big fuzzy bunny, maybe you feel differently about that person than if you saw them what their actual physical appearance was. So as humans, we're super big on visuals. When we look at things, we form instantaneous impressions that we can't even articulate what the impression is or why we formed it. So I see a danger in that. If we haven't built up this skill set, this knowledge base of how to evaluate, people or entities that we're interacting with, especially again the young people, there's a real potential for people to be taken advantage of, for people to have their visual senses override their good judgment, right? And of course, there's always going to be people that are vulnerable or susceptible to this type of thing. The other thing that I've actually seen and witnessed with, I have a friends who have a daughter who actually is fighting an addiction to VR, and she wants to spend all her time in the metaverse because it's easier than dealing with, the problems and challenges that are inherent in the physical world. So sometimes as people, we want to take the easy path, especially if we're feeling overwhelmed or if we're, not in a good headspace. So I do have concerns about that. Like you said, I know there's already, segments of our population that have kind of pulled back from society and are doing things more remotely. So of course, if you give them a super good tool to be able to live their lives without, having to take on the challenges of interacting with other people and interacting in the physical world, there are people that will take that path.
Thank you. I think that the one that I like to share is, now I'm gonna get into the hot topic with Facebook. Okay, so it's the level of advertisement that we can be having without knowing. So gets interesting. I was watching the other day a talk from a guy, I think that his name is John Rosenberg, and he was saying how we are so susceptible right now, and especially in terms of when we are having an experience, a virtual reality experience, we are maybe in a world, etc. How do we know that those avatars are humans? How can we know that the conversation that they are having there, that we are kind of like perceiving, is real? How do we know that this is not artificial intelligence trying to convince you of the things that the system already know what you like? So the phones, all of these systems already are constantly recording this information for these purposes. And in the metaverse, I believe it's going to happen. The same thing. This is a very big concern. If that is the case, if that is the scenario, then this is a total breach of our rights, of our ethics, and all of this. I believe because this is something that really at this point is not just the people that is in tech, it's not just the people that is in business, it's just like everyone who has a device. I believe that there is an important role from us to have these conversations, because the way that the laws work are based on what is called ethics. And definitely, so these movements are created. The more pressure there is in the media, the more people is speaking about this. Then that's when we start, like, governments get obligated to put attention, because many people now is speaking about this. This is a concern. It's a political issue. So then they have to create rules. They are pressured to create laws that can protect that. And so one of the most important things that is needed right now is the protection of the identity and also the data that is being used. So pretty much all these platforms are right now using all our data, and we don't know how they are using it. And we are all the time being exposed to maybe publicity that we maybe don't even know if we really are, it's authentic that we want it or not, or maybe we have been manipulated for that. So I think that that's one of the big risks with the metaverse. Would you like to add something?
Yeah, well, I'll just say something about the data, right? So when you think about how much data is tracked on you right now, imagine the fact that right now we're sitting in reality. But if this was the metaverse, everything is data. Everything. Any interaction you make, any transaction you do, any way you look, anything you speak is data. So 100% of your new reality is being generated. We better make sure we know what's happening with that data. So I guess just reinforcing that point, this is already a big topic and it's about to be a heck of a lot bigger. There are organizations trying to look at some of these things. So XRSI, the XR Safety Institute initiative. Anyway, it's doing some stuff. There's actually, I think it's Metaverse Safety Week, the second week of December. Bet you didn't know that. Anyway, I'm glad that people are talking about the right things, right? It's good that we're tackling those things, but it's super important that we get there because the things that are coming fast, and we don't really have the right laws and regulations to deal with the level of technology we already have. That's what I like.
So my comment on all of that is I definitely get the whole data thing, the whole privacy thing, the whole need for protecting the vulnerable, but I actually think a true metaverse is not something that will be regulated and policed. I think it will be a free world with no boundaries, with no parameters. And I think that there's no technology that is good or evil inherently. It's about the hearts and the minds of the people that are operating the technology. So I think really it's up to us, the human species, to make our metaverse a good one, right? And like anything, it's going to have ugly patches in it, and maybe people will appreciate those ugly patches. But I would hope that for the most part, our free, open metaverse with no parameters and no policing, because if we're regulating and policing, that implies ownership, right? So I'm all about self-sovereignty in this world, like in this metaverse world. That's where I see that going. So I think it's all up to us, and I think as a species, we have a responsibility to make our next phase of existence, a good one. And not do all the stupid stuff we did in this one.
So what do you all think? We said we were gonna hear all the things that you had to say, and then we talked. But hopefully we've given you some good foundations, maybe given you some good things to think about, and let's see what you have to say. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. So what you were saying about going for your mom for a coffee, with your mom for coffee there, kind of in a virtual space, kind of made me think about the real physical geography of the world. And is there anybody working on sort of like a one-to-one mapping thing so that you could actually, transport yourself to Europe, for example, and walking down the street in some place you've never been and see some things you could interact with virtually, or is it all just straight like a completely fictional world, like a Minecraft or something like that?
For this particular case, I use an app that is called Spatial. And in Spatial, there are different environments. So you can have an environment that is maybe restaurant, or that is a natural place, or a beach. And then when she wears the headset, we can all meet together through a link, for example. This can be also be done in the computer as well. And then we meet together in that space. So I've seen some platforms trying to work on how can we do it sort of like mixed reality, which is another kind of like layer where you can see your surroundings, your real surroundings, and you can have your avatar, like to be able to digitally connect and have these maybe encounters. So this is pure remote, features, collaboration. So I believe right now there is these options, and a couple of years ago, I think Microsoft was speaking about Mesh, one of their advances that they wanted to bring, and recently, as we saw the last Facebook Connect, there was this kind of partnership that they have now with Microsoft, and it's actually to bring the technology at that point where people can connect remotely, because this case that they were showcasing in the Facebook Connect was mostly more about corporate, like how can work can be performed remotely, which is where there is most of the money for these companies. So of course, they are working very hard towards that. That's the ultimate goal, where I can, invite you to my home, and you can see my home around, and you digitally. I mean, it sounds pretty cool, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, it's we need to be cautious, right? Because what happens with the data? That's always my concern. Yes. Thanks.
Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, so there's this platform, Decentraland, and I'm sure there's others as well, but within Decentraland, they recreated models of very famous buildings, like famous art galleries and museums, and like the Taj Mahal. That is like you can walk around and actually, experience that particular installation. I don't know if anyone's working on an actual, recreation of the globe in the metaverse. And I honestly don't know why we would do that when we have an opportunity to create an entirely new world. And that excites me. I mean, obviously there's some fantastic artifacts from our real world that are worth recreating so people can experience them without having to travel and have those opportunities. But like, I think greenfield when I think about the metaverse, right? I think we can do whatever we want. We can, make it really, really cool, really interactive. We can do, sky's the limit, right? Ultimately, and that's exciting.
I have talked to companies that are doing that recreation and doing it with an interesting spin, though, like trying, I don't want to say they're trying to be the metaverse, but essentially have, the Google Street View of the world where you could go wherever in VR, but trying to take other people's experiences and integrating them. So like our office is 3 blocks this way. The idea would be if you walk in that virtual space past our office, you'd be able to connect if we have a public, VR, metaverse, whatever you want to call it, experience. You can connect through that. But I agree. Why would we want to just have that? But again, in the metaverse, if all these worlds are interconnected and one of them is ours, it's probably cool. But should that be the be all and all? No, I hope not. We travel wherever we want, to places that are real and places that are not.
I think that one interesting case is somebody who is maybe going through a disability, or maybe for some reason they cannot travel, but they still want to experience how beautiful it would be to see the pyramids, or maybe I don't even have the resources, but I have a device and I can still kind of dream and understand the culture, learn more, become more educated. So those are interesting cases. But when you mention about sort of mapping the world digitally, one another case that I can mention is Niantic, who were the creators of Pokemon Go. They have they did what is called an ARDK, which is kind of a way for developers to now use pretty much the infrastructure that they have. So they can now bring, I don't know if you've seen the news, but they are releasing now with this Snapdragon very advanced now augmented reality glasses that you can use outside. So that's when you're not going to be so, limited by the virtual environment. You can now interact. And what they did is that they are creating the whole digital version of the world with a system that is called VPS. It's kind of like saying GPS, but this one is VPS. And now developers can use the ARDK and create experiences where I can say, hey, could you go, for example, to the forest? In this exact location, I can send it to you. And you go and take your phone or your glasses, and you're going to see an amazing, beautiful experience happening there. Maybe celebrating something, or maybe, bringing some sort of music and particles and things that are, kind of enhance the experience. So those are some of the cases that I've seen for mapping digitally the world.
It'd be nice to select our season.
We're working on it.
Oh, there was someone who was second, yeah.
Yeah, you guys covered a lot of the risks to building the metaverse and kind of people living out big parts of their life in the metaverse. I was curious, what are your thoughts on how do we mitigate those risks? And there was a recent study just published around children and exposure to social media, and a lot of basically skyrocketing suicidal ideation, hospitalizations through 2016 to 2020. And I think it's the Center for Humane Technology that was advocating for age-restricting access to hey, until you're 18, you can't register an account until you can get a valid license, driver's license, something along those lines. What are your thoughts on age restriction to these tools? Because they seem like they're really powerful tools, and like any technology, there's risks and there's benefits. And what are your thoughts on that?
I'll say, as a parent of many children, I have a mixed family, there's six children in my home at any one time. There's not going to be a replacement for parenting. We can't just switch. I mean, we are recording this. I don't know if that was I lied about my kid's birthday. right? So that they could still get an Apple account. There's no real way around that, I don't think. So yeah, I don't think there's a lot of value going down that path. I think that's about educating parents and making sure we're doing the right things, educating children. I take a look at the things that my kids are doing at school and I had the don't do drugs, 10-minute talk too, many years ago. But I think a lot of that is really advancing, right? So I think bringing that in through education for the children, bringing that in through education of parents is probably the path there. Yeah, that's my opinion, but yeah, I'm not sure you could regulate that away.
I'm actually with Kevin on this one. I'm also a mother, and I can tell you one thing: when you try and restrict kids from doing something, that's a huge incentive for them. So you cannot substitute for parenting, and I think in this world that's becoming more complicated by the day, this is just one more complication to becoming a parent and to being a parent and to being a good parent is being cognizant of these virtual worlds that your kids can get lost in. There's been already some reports of some very unsavory stuff happening in some of these. I'm not going to name names, but Roblox. So there's some really disturbing reports coming out of there because they have these private rooms and this whole game is geared towards kids, and it's very alarming. But for me, my kid's been into video games since she was probably 3 years old. She started playing video games with her dad and with her stepdad. So the big thing for me has been about that parenting and explaining the dangers, making her aware, scenario-based training. What do you do if this happens? What would you do if someone asked you to do this? That kind of a thing. So, as much as we like our regulations, the reality is there's so many ways around regulations, and kids just love getting around stuff. So,
yeah, I think that it depends on how the values, right, that happen around how we want to raise the kids. I really love the application of these technologies and these for very utility driven experiences and stuff. I'm pretty sure this is gonna come to the schools because right now we can see a lot of projects, studios working on the the experience of understanding the universe, of biology, sciences, etc., and using the headsets for that purpose. I believe that companies are going to be also building more and more customized products for the ages and for the purpose, like for schools. So the kids can use certain devices, for example, that have access only to those type of resources, educational resources, which maybe might be a more safer atmosphere. Hopefully we can see those type of devices and we can encourage these type of things, which is the same like when we have an iPad and there are educational resources and we can maybe restrict or be mindful with how long kids are spending time maybe in games. I honestly am not a gamer. I don't come from that background. I never, my family never had resources for me to be a gamer. So, but what I've seen from my own research, because I like to get into this topic of ethics in XR, I did a talk for the XR Global Conference from Europe in maybe 3 weeks ago, and then I had to do a lot of research for this. I found out that the health organization, like the Global Health Organization, World Health Organization, decided to also bring into the research, etc., these gaming conditions as a disorder, which means that there is too much. And this is an interesting topic because then that means that there has to be limits and that there have been consequences and that now are backed up by research. So I'm not suggesting that gaming is bad, it's just what are the limits that we can be aware for that. So this becomes from the example. For example, I like augmented reality, I like virtual reality, and I have kids. So then it's oh wow, how I am, I am if the kid sees me with the headset, how mindful I am being because I don't want, later on to have problems. Of course, kind of fear sometimes comes across. But also there is the other interesting part where I kind of explain the creative part, creating, designing, applying actually concepts of mindful design, and how long they see me doing that. Because I'm not a gamer, I don't use the headset for a long time. I just use it for something that I want to prototype or something like that. It's just like a tool. It's like if I am a carpenter and I am not by using the hammer all the time, I just use it for the purpose. And I think that that's the best approach, like trying to be mindful on how we're using the tools and how are we, guiding them in the technology. Yes.
I have a question around, are you aware of any research that has been done on the physical effects of using the devices themselves, either based around time spent in the space or perhaps different age groups or perhaps different levels of susceptibility to visual stimuli? Are you aware of any kind of research around that? I just think about, how we were all using our cell phones or the heavy ones back in the day, and then we, slowly learned about all of the things that can happen to your physicality based around using it. And, we only learned that after, 15, 20 years learning to be ergonomic. I know there's a bunch of us that have, neck and back issues. Our bodies weren't meant to sit in front of a computer. Just wondering if you had any insights, thoughts, or any research around the physical effects of its use.
Well, I'm certain those studies are going on, and I'm certain I've come across them. I haven't really dived into them, but I can tell you that anecdotally, when you speak to people that do use VR headsets frequently, they do complain a lot about the physical impacts of it. So I was actually part of a Metaverse panel, and we did it in the alt VR space. So I actually was wearing a headset, and it was a 2-hour, panel / workshop, and by the end of it, my shoulders and neck were aching, and I could feel wrinkles forming on my face from this. I swear I could feel it. I was like, I'm gonna eat so much night cream tonight. But it raises a good point, because I actually think that one of the big barriers right now to augmented reality, virtual reality, and the metaverse is the hardware. The headsets are far too heavy. You can't wear them. Like the work world, there are people, formerly Facebook, now Meta, that has this vision, and Microsoft has this vision too of people spending 8 hours of their workday in the metaverse. And right now, there's absolutely no way that anyone that didn't have like the neck of a bull could pull that off, right? So, and there's other limitations too physically, because like the controllers for right now, as far as I'm concerned, they're not intuitive at all, and I really struggle when I'm playing interactive VR games to figure out what controls and everything like that. Like probably the only game that I can play effortlessly is Beat Saber, because you don't have to do anything except for wave it around, right? And I love that. But like we need to get to a place of much better hardware, including haptic suits, right? So when you're doing something in VR, something happens to you. But then there's more questions around that too, because you're playing a fighting game, you get a kidney punch, and your suit punches you. Like that's good and bad, I guess, if you want to have the full experience, but you can hurt yourself, right? But I think it's just a really kind of emerging thing, and this we're gonna run into all sorts of questions as the hardware evolves for us, right? And it's gonna evolving problems, shall we say, challenges, to solve.
No, even just quickly, because I know we've got lots of hands. Just the, all those things aside, VR is tricking your brain, right, into things happening. So, like if you go into a VR experience and you choose the most natural settings, right? If I press forward on this controller, I'm gonna move, I'm walking. That's the right thing, right? Wrong. So your brain knows that you are not walking forward. It's like, actually, I'm familiar with the experience of walking forward, and that's not what's happening right now. Your body is not moving at all, and I'm not cool with this, vomit, right? Like, so there's, like, that's basically, if you don't have your settings right in your headset, that's going to be your first VR experience. So, just the fact that you're kind of working around tricking your body into some of those things, like, I feel like even if we master, the lightness of a headset and all those things, there's still going to be some trickery there. to figure some of those things out. So just wanted to throw that in.
Thank you. I've seen a couple of papers from universities in Europe, and it has been mostly like what happens when a person is wearing one of these devices after 8 hours or more, which is kind of like what the companies are gonna try to sell us onto living that we did. And so this is interesting. The devices are gonna start evolving more, like becoming more lighter, etc. It is kind of like difficult for us as it is with the cell phone. Like who doesn't have a cell phone right now? It is gonna be amazing. It's gonna be like most of us are gonna probably have access to some of these devices, and maybe even for work. We're gonna be required to maybe sometimes wear certain type of devices to communicate remotely, etc. Maybe this is in 10 years or so. We don't know when exactly that's gonna happen. But if that's gonna happen, then what we have to do is to become, again, just like with our cell phones, the same thing, how mindful we can be of using this for something that is really, really needed. Because the problem becomes is when we ourselves kind of lose ourselves into, hey, what is my reality around? How can I be more conscious of my health? Like if I know that this is a lot of dependence, how can I break into go and walk and do other activities? I really love the applications of this for work. That's why we decided to have this conversations about work, business, how that could be very, very useful. Yeah, I can share with you later, maybe those research. And somebody else is interested, of course, as well. Can share.
So my question, just a comment it was really interesting that we talked about ethics. Was because Metaverse, I learned today, is not just Facebook Metaverse and what they're trying to create. It's not just VR lab or whatever. It's beyond that. And so I know that there's a lot of development about, of course, ownership. But then my question is, how do we get a part of that in the future? And it's not just about owning a land beside Snoop Dogg's mansion, VR mansion. Right? It's, how do we take ownership of that? And how do we also know that, we own this, not like Facebook is not watching us and getting our data.
So I mean, how are you going to own it? I don't think we fully know that yet. I mean, you can buy a plot of land next to Snoop Dogg. You can do that. How is that done? Through blockchain, through NFT. So like, we can answer that from a technology perspective in terms of how those things happen. But will that be the same with every experience? Maybe not, right? Maybe there's going to be some worlds in the metaverse where nobody owns it and everybody co-creates, and that's the cool part about that world, right? You can just go in and build things with others. So I don't know, I guess, is that part of the answer? But there are things that you can do now. There are things you can do. So whether that's buying that plot of land, buy it further from Snoop Dogg's house, it's cheaper. But like there are different experiences that you can get into now. Some cost money, some don't. Some allow you to just be part of it. So like Allspace was a great topic that we could probably talk a lot on Allspace. Like, so do you own something in Allspace? Well, you got like your little home area, I guess, and you can customize it. Same thing on Facebook. So you could say that you own and have some sort of autonomy there. But like just the experience itself is a little bit different. So it's not really about ownership. Like, so there's a comedy show every Friday night in Allspace that you can just go to, right? You don't need tickets, you don't need any of these things that you normally would. So if you can be part of those experiences now, or as you say, for free minus cost of headset. But yeah, there's a lot of ways to get into that. Yeah.
So I'm just going to expand on that a little bit. Like I said, I'm big on self-sovereignty, and my suggestion for ownership is to stay away from centralized models and gravitate towards decentralized models, because in a central model, there's always a custodial ownership of your assets, right? And that's just as true in a lot of spaces as it is in blockchain. The other thing I want to say, when I think about the metaverse, I think one of the great things about the metaverse is the building of communities, right? So from an ownership perspective, there are a lot of platforms when you can go on, and Alvear is one of them. You can create your own event and you can advertise it on their platform for free and just say, hey, I want to get together on Friday night and talk about X. So you could actually develop a stake and a stakeholder group and kind of ownership in a community, if you will. And that's where I see big values as opposed to owning, NFTs, which I'm not against NFTs at all. I think we do need a mechanism for verifiable digital assets, and I think it's a good fit. But, I think the community aspect is where the big value is, especially right now, given the limitations of the hardware.
I think that another thing is that this is a little similar to when there are sometimes businesses that base all their businesses on Instagram, right? So all their presence, but what if for some reason Instagram decides not to exist anymore, or something happened with the system that sometimes that has happened, it doesn't work for one day, and then millions of dollars.
Sorry.
Yeah, you
Had to
see.
say it.
There's so many examples, and so the same happens. I think that depending on a specific platform shouldn't be necessarily the ideal way to create something. I think that it's not a good idea to just have all these influences from platforms, from big businesses to say, hey, come here, build, because, this is beside this. It's just like an idea, because it's not, it's not land, it's not physical. So they are just selling us an idea, and that's how we are buying. But what if the platform, Decentraland, disappears one of these days? Recently, for example, what happened with FTX, just in a day, it was totally vanished. So that is the risks that are right now. So I believe looking for ways on how we can create the stuff that we can host ourselves, for example, that would be nice, because something that you can own and nobody can, remove from you.
I think you've had a question for a while.
Yeah, well, I have a lot of questions. So, both. First, we're talking about a lot of things, a lot of space in Metaverse 3. Where the money come from Metaverse, by for sure, is for sure in the data we can generate there. But is a safe environment be there, be free. Also, I have a lot of questions about blockchain, see how that's gonna affect you, the entire, because they trying to make like a unique identification key to the blockchain, and that is gonna affect you against all the around all the metaverse. So if you have thought about that, if you have idea how the big comp or the big comp is gonna use the metaverse for create money here, create money about make money about the entire industry. Share about that.
So I'm a blockchain educator. I actually spend a lot of my time researching blockchain, and I do some digital asset management as part of my work. And I have a lot of things to say about blockchain, but so FTX we mentioned, and I just want to be clear, FTX was a centralized platform, a custodial arrangement, and the rule in crypto and in blockchain is if you don't own your private keys, you don't own your crypto, right? So cryptocurrency, I know it's got a bad rap, it's got a reputation problem, but the reality is in a metaverse, we will need a form of currency so that we can exchange goods and services, right? Because as much as, there's barter systems and everything like that, it's going to be a lot easier as a first implementation to have an actual global currency. So the nice thing about blockchain and about tokens is that they're transferable to other tokens, right? And there's centralized exchanges where you can do that. I wouldn't recommend that. There's decentralized exchanges where you can do that and nobody owns that, right? It's all kind of open source, and that's where you have that self-sovereignty. So one of the things that's been happening in blockchain, which is interesting, is I touched on it earlier, but building of bridges. So bridges where you can easily transfer, assets, NFTs and tokens from one blockchain to another blockchain. And that's what I see as being like the rails, like the bare foundation of the metaverse that we're gonna build. There's a lot of components within blockchain that make sense to leverage in the metaverse. So smart contracts is a thing, which are, basically code-based contracts that work without any middleman, without any person having to touch it to do approvals, without any third-party institute having to say, yeah. Like for instance, when you pay your credit card, the money comes out of your bank account right away, but your credit card balance doesn't change for the next 2 days, right? That's because there's approvals and things that have to take place in between. And that can't happen in a truly, digital world in a metaverse, right? So I think blockchain is an interesting technology. I do think it is foundational for building a metaverse, but that's my opinion. And, I've been very into blockchain for a number of years now. So I actually fear the companies that are trying to build metaverses for us. So once you get us in your little pen there, what are you going to do to us? What are you going to sell us? What propaganda? So when you think about propaganda, this notion of advertisements that have hidden messages and are showing you things that you're not even aware of, right? And this is a thing that happens. There's been a lot of studies on this. How much worse is it going to be when you're immersed in their world, right? And what are they going to sell you, and how effectively are they going to sell you in that sense, right? So that's why I'm big on the blockchain solution. Obviously, we're not there yet. There's, going to be many, many years of iterations of development and where do we go from here kind of stuff and learning. But that's my take on it.
Thank you. I want to say that here the risk as well is that at what point we pass from being the user to be the product, So because we become, just as you mentioned, data. That's the data that can be sold, so more money, can be put into the company. So we become the product. That's the main concept.
You haven't had one yet.
Yes, not yet. I'm fairly fascinated about this idea of ownership, and I like to think that we're at a crossroads where larger tech companies are saying, well, we own you, and we as the people are saying, no, we want a decentralized system, we want to have some ownership ourselves. But I think what terrifies me, paramount, is if the metaverse is based on a decentralized system, what happens if someone steals something of yours, or if someone assaults you, or something happens to you? How is that policed and regulated? Or,
It's not, and that happens every day today in the blockchain space. There's scams, there's collapses of entire platforms, and that's just a reality of this new space. So I feel like over time we're going to evolve better controls in the form of like smart contracts and like decentralized autonomous organizations. And also, let's not forget vigilante groups. That's always been a thing, so we can do that too, right? I think there's going to be any number of solutions, but if you're suggesting that as any decentralized platform that isn't controlled by a central authority that isn't policed isn't going to have some adverse events, that's not realistic. It absolutely will have adverse events, which is why, just like walking down the street late at night, we're going to have to develop our safety systems, our best practices for ensuring that we keep ourselves safe, keeping informed about what the dangers and risks are, and being mindful of, how we're exposing ourselves and what risks there are.
One more question and then we have to. Yes, go ahead.
Is there anybody else then? Because I already had one before.
No.
Just back to that same thing, actually, this concept of decentralization and ownership. If you build something in the metaverse and you're doing it like in a decentralized platform of some sort, how do you protect what you have? What's to stop somebody else from coming along and, trashing it, so to speak, right? Or whatever. Or is that right now it's just kind of a no man's land and we don't know that yet?
Well, I mean, there's always an aspect that we don't know, but I mean, there's definitely, if ownership is implemented in a platform, right, if the concept is there, then it can certainly allow you to say this is edible by others or this is not. So, like, that exists in most of our platforms now, so that feels like a table stakes for most environments in the Metaverse. So I would imagine it would look like that, but who knows?
We're still learning every day, right? This is all very, very, very new, which is why I think it's important that we have these discussions, because when you're doing anything new, you're going to miss things. There's going to be gaps, and you're going to have those lessons learned, right? So, you always want to try and get ahead of it as much as possible, which is why, like I say, I think this is important.
Thank you. I believe you also have a question.
Yeah, so, cherry on top, what in your company do you guys do to implement blockchain alongside Metaverse, besides smart contracts and office space? What is a product that you guys would recommend to your clients that, how do you implement that?
So for Capstone Ridge Group, which I am a senior digital transformation consultant there, the work that I do in blockchain and the decentralized finance space is separate from the work that I do from Capstone Ridge, although they do sponsor me to give talks on blockchain and all sorts of things. It's one of those things where it's this emerging technology, and some people say, well, it's a solution without a problem. So there's lots of ways I think we can leverage it. We're not there yet. So I think a lot of companies are in this kind of state where they're, keeping an eye on it and looking for opportunities. But we don't have a solid business case quite yet.
I'll say the one that we've been building, most of our things, the Metaverse tech, if we want to call it, are typically started in our innovation lab. We're certainly trying to get to a point where our clients are coming and wanting to do these things and understand them, but a lot of it is still leading horses to water right at this point. But one thing we have around blockchain right now is a system that we call on points. So the idea is it's, you do good things. I'm trying to generalize this at a 10,000 foot level in 2 minutes, but essentially you do things that we would like you to do. So, and it's a corporate reward system, right? So that might be, you're helping out the marketing team, or you're building some collateral, or you're making a blog post, right? Whatever behaviors we like to promote as an organization. And then those points are tracked, and you can redeem them for swag, right? So like, right now, there's lots of times where you did a good job. Here's a T-shirt or whatever, right? We see that a lot, or show up at some conference or whatever. But we're trying to kind of bring those things together. And the idea is to take that. Actually, how much was she saying? But whatever I'm saying now. But the idea is to take that. We have a lot of clients asking about employee engagement, and we think that will be a really good tool to be able to take that forward. So essentially, we're building it for our organization first. And we'll try that out and then see if we can take that to others and product test. Please don't steal it.
Thank you so much. It's been an amazing talk for sure. There is all the information here from us. If you'd like to have a chat, if you'd like to discuss any, doubts that you might have with your project, etc. We for sure maybe can guide you through maybe any questions that you have, or maybe connections, etc., that we can share, or research, etc. So yeah, it's been amazing. Thank you so much. We really appreciate a lot your presence, because as we mentioned, this is a topic that I believe everyone should know about right now. There are impacts that maybe not all of us are aware of, so it's very, very nice to be educated. Thank you so much, and yeah, let's see each other around. Let's follow each other in social media. Thank you.
I will say, if anybody wants to talk more now, I think we'll all be around for a little bit. Online has a lounge on the 4th floor, so right when you come out of the elevator, there's all the smart people that I have online are there. So like, you can talk to the real people, not the guy that comes up with the mic. But I'll be there too if you want to talk to me.
Thank you.